You want to start?
Okay, Pat. Patricia.
Yes.
I just want to give you a warning, though, if you're gonna do that. Hi, thank you, I'm gonna officially call the Plan 2040 CAC January 15th, 2020 meeting to order. Thank you all for coming, we appreciate it. We've had a little bit of a break, so I hope everybody had great holidays and is ready to get back to it. So we are going to go through healthy communities. We have a lot of expertise in the room this evening. But Cindy had a few things that she wanted to go over first.
Yeah, so first I just want to introduce you all to Holly Simmons. She is the latest planner to join our long-range planning team. So she'll help us finish up the GDP and she will help work with the region plan process next week. So I want to thank you all for getting your comments. Those of you that commented really had really good, constructive suggestions, very helpful. There's still some editorial comments going on that really aren't useful. We'd like you to stick more towards the strategies. The beginning of the text is really for your benefit to give you some context to the goals, policies, strategies. We'll go through this kind of point by point, but like this first page, first couple of pages, page 1, the goals with the related policies. We'll go back up. They're part of the document. The county agencies have spent a lot of time putting thought into these goals and policies and strategies, and they're there to address the issues that have been identified in the communities. So, I mean, Gary, I didn't really know what you meant by planning for, your comments is planning should include actionable goals that can be measured and progress tracked. And, I mean, the end of the document, that's what we do, goals, policies, and strategies. And in the plan outline that we've given you and talked about previously, we, said that part of this plan will include an implementation plan, and as part of that, there'll be an implementation action committee. There'll be an annual report that tracks the progress of these strategies, as well as a mid-year or midterm 4-year report that monitors the success of these strategies. So is there something else that you're...
Well, I mean, that comment that I made was basically a follow-on to the conversation that we had with Steve, I guess, months ago, last fall, where, I was concerned about having wording in these documents that you can track progress. And Steve mentioned basically what you just reiterated, to have a committee or a group that would monitor and track things, because we've seen where in the past the smaller planned GDPs just
Right, and that's, as we stated, we're changing that, and that's all we can do is keep moving forward. So the kind of comments that we're looking for with the review of this is, do these goals, policy, strategies at the end of the document, are they identifying the issues?
I went through the document top to bottom. So, I realized that there are, towards the bottom of the document, it does, in the action section, it does talk about things in more detail.
Yeah, and as we've said, that's where you concentrate. All of this other information ahead of it was sort of what Steve had offered to you all to give you context, because when we did the goals, policy, strategies for environment, it was difficult for some of you to kind of relate back to why they were there. So this sets that stage and it's just there for information.
Well, you know, the other thing that I'm not sure where I put it, but was that the document reads by multiple authors, multiple departments submitted things. It doesn't read the same. And I found
Right,
that
and in the end
kind
it
of
will,
disturbing.
and we don't want to discuss formatting or anything. You will get a copy of a final,
Well, that's not formatting,
document. Well,
that's how the document's
but
put
this
together.
is for
It should be-
your,
It should be a consistent
and it will be
story.
consistent.
And even the items, each group address things a little differently. I was really impressed with the public safety and the amount of detail and action items that they have in their report. Others were lacking. So there wasn't consistency.
Well, it
And
depends
a lot
on
of
the
it was
issues
history.
that were
A lot of it was
identified.
history.
And so if you think there are issues that were identified and not addressed in the some departments might only have one or two strategies, and that sufficiently addresses any issues that were identified. So we can't measure one department against another. We have to look at the issues and are they sufficiently being addressed? And so let's move on through this.
How I would have addressed that was give talking points to each author. So here's the talking points you need to answer.
Gary, it's not that easy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we just had contact with one department today. You know, different departments are working with us in different ways. And I think it's going to be virtually impossible to get it to be consistent all the way across because they're all different.
Vision theme, and we're not gonna discuss that tonight. I don't wanna, you all spent like 3 meetings getting your vision together, and so we can go back, you know, after we're finished all of this other information, maybe in April, if the majority of you wanna open that back up and discuss these, we can do that, but I wanna stick to the goals, policies, and strategies of healthy communities tonight. Again, like I said, this planning framework, this is just for context for you. There's a lot of overlap with other chapters. It's there for your benefit to know sort of what our existing programs, plans, code, county and state code that we have to follow that address previous issues. And so some of these maybe need to be updated. Some of them, maybe there might need to be new plans or programs, and so this is just for you to know what we have in place. It's required that we relate those back. Most likely it'll be in an appendix. It won't be in each chapter the way you see it now, but it's just so you're not having to refer back to previous documents. It's there for you as you're going through reading these documents related to the goals, policies, and strategies in each chapter. So we'll move on to on page 5. Yeah, again, like I think on page 2, we talked about rewording some of the visions under the state vision, and that's not possible. That's codified by state law. We are required to address these in our comprehensive plan. We have to show how our plan is going to implement those state visions. And this plan can't discuss or change those visions. Page 3, there was we're talking about the 2009 plan, and I guess there's a small area of plans, and the comment was, what is different and why is it better? The 2009 GDP did not include a process for small area plans. And the Plan 2040 will include a process for community level planning that will not only help to implement Plan 2040 goals, but will give residents of those communities a voice at the local level versus what we have now at the 30,000 foot level. And that's what we've heard as one of the issues identified. So hopefully that does make it better than the 2009.
My comments there were really is, this whole section is a lot of real estate, paper real estate devoted to history, some of which is gonna be 3+4 years old by the time this document hits the street.
And again, this is for you for context.
And, you know, I think more words in there, that would talk about, you know, identify issues, what are we gonna do better this time around, I think would help a lot. I mean, that's a lot of time, a lot of pages spent on plain old history. That goes back, you
On
know,
what district?
20 years of history.
Well,
I mean, tell me what you're gonna do to make things better.
I mean, it's part of the DEP is the requirement. So, you know, if you don't want to read it, then don't read it. Some of you would ask for it so you could understand what, I mean, the history is relevant to the issues that have been identified, and then how do you get to making it better? And that's the goals, policies, and strategies.
Cindy, your statement a minute ago about this possibly being in an appendix is really helpful, because I don't think we've ever heard that before. At least I haven't.
Okay.
So it has been troubling me as I've read this, thinking who's going to read through all of this, appreciating the background, but one looking at it from the perspective of the consumer of the plan. So what you've just said gives me great comfort that that's not going to be the way they're going to see the document.
No, and there'll probably be two parts to the document. One of the downfalls of 2009 plan, it's technical, it's difficult for planners to go through and find consistency when they're reviewing development plans. But a lot of that is required. So one thought is to have a separate volume that will be more technical in nature, that meets the requirements of state law, and then a separate document that is more user-friendly. And then I appreciate your comment if you would be willing to help with that, and when we get there, I'd appreciate that. Right, on page 6, comments. So there was a comment about inconsistency with, inconsistency across the county relating to the feeder systems. And I mean, that's a goal that we have. But
this is still background information, isn't it? Where we're in right now?
yes.
Okay.
And then Kate, you had a comment about what % of eligible students those 3,000 represent. And I'll let Greg speak to that more, but it's a floating number. I mean, just some of the calculations that we have are somewhere between 10 and 13%.
So that's in and of itself helps me with some context.
Yeah.
I mean, Greg Stewart for the record, we basically we can do a run, so like today I did a data run. There are about 2,600 students that are enrolled in the CAT centers, and that's basically semester A is at the end of the month, becomes semester B, and the kids can actually just take a class in the first semester or the first half of the year, and maybe after the next semester, the next half year, they might not be at the CAT center. So it's kind of it floats. And then I guess there's a question about eligibility. We've got about 23,000 high school students, basically 9 through 12. So at 26, that's roughly 10%, but in order to even apply, basically get into the CAP Center, you have to have a GPA of 2.5 for the first semester, say the first time you go in there. In later years, they actually lower it down to 2.0, grade point average. So again, a lot of these are the vocational type training. So there is, so as far as getting into the eligibility, although there's 23,000, we got 26. I don't know how many applied that didn't get in because of grades. So that's a challenging question to answer.
So I just FYI, and thank you for that, that's helpful. I was looking for it as at a kind of a macro level to have a sense of within the county, what are we doing to help prepare kids who are not going to college? And as a percentage of the whole, what are we doing in career and tech relative to those who are in a college prep direction? So even the 10 to 13% gives me some context.
I think the next comment relating to student enrollment forecasts.
Yeah, I can talk briefly on that. It's I can tell you the last 6 years, we are very, I'm going to say very accurate and say the one year out type thing. That's what we do a lot of the forecasts as far as teacher placement. We are plus or minus less than 0.5%, and we've had as good as being off by 64 students out of like 83,000, which is a very little delta. And again, it goes plus or minus. So we were off about 500 students, but right now we have just under 85,000 students, and that's to me is fairly good. And we're listening to the budget officer talking about, they look at forecasts of economics and real estate transfer taxes, and they're happy when they're within 2%. And our variables are I have no control over who buys a house and sells a house and how many kids move in, and so I think they do pretty. My demographer I think does a very good job on the estimating. And if you look long, like 10 years ago, what we forecasted, I can tell you we've actually underestimated the students. And we have been adding, we had about 10,000 students in the past 10 years. So this county is growing, unlike some other counties like Carroll County is actually declining. So we have a big road ahead. And as far as your GDP and how you guys set zoning, keep in mind every 2,500 homes is equivalent to an elementary school. That now costs about $50 million. So as you zone property or make suggestions, just keep that in mind. We also need to make sure we preserve land, public land for that infrastructure. Yes, ma'am.
In your long-term plan, you also advocate about 26 new schools over the next decade or two. I have no idea where those are, and what you just talked about, new elementary school, seems to me it would be important for us to have that information as to where the 26 are that is in your plan.
Yeah, I have a kind of a map I did back in 2017, looking just 20 years, since 20 years ahead, seeing where we don't have sites. And kind of said, I know I need a high school site in certain areas, elementary schools. I mean, we're short. There's a lot of areas, so we sort of have that map that I've shared with planning and zoning. And again, I can certainly send it over to Cindy again. We can certainly update it. We have acquired some property, or we have some property that we are currently under contract. We know that we have a deficit. And the way the county is growing, the biggest thing that concerns public schools that can be corrected if the council does take action on it. There's a lot of area that's zoned commercial and industrial that they've allowed overlay zones that allow R22 and R15 to be developed. It sounds great for the developer, but if you look in those areas, a lot of it's a Linthicum area by the airport, there are no school sites there. And my concern is as a taxpayer and trying to look ahead, if we're going to continue that overlay where, somebody says it's supposed to be commercially zoned, and there's these overlay zonings that allow residential construction, that kind of basically overrides what the GDP even says. It's supposed to be commercial industrial property, it's supposed to be commercial industrial tax base, not
Yeah.
residential homes that really impact the school system.
So it's important for us, it seems to me, Cindy, to know what that report is relative to the 26. And also to look at out of the box thinking, some of those commercial and industrial zones that are no longer, that are dead. Looking at the possibility of converting some of those into school properties. So, there's a whole lot of challenges ahead, but without that information, the kinds of things that we're going to talk about, all of them, they will be really short-sighted.
So is this what also the premise that, as we did our exercise the other day, what was that, 83,000 homes? We put in for Is that what it was, 28,000, is that what that's on? 28,000
Well, keep in mind, I looked at a total yield study at one time, back in 2015. What I did was I just took the current zone and basically overlaid that and said, if you have basically 100 acres of R5 or whatever, it generates that many units. But when I looked at commercial industrial land, I assumed 0. And when you look at that, you can actually see, I kind of did a color code of the whole county to see, well, how bad is it? It's really bad. Just the current zone, forget the overlay zones that we've allowed, both the BWI overlay, and I think there's like a couple that allow the bracket. That's not even factored into it. And when you start talking about, elementary school is supposed to be 15, 20 acres, high school, middle school is about 40 acres, high school is about 60 acres. Well, try to find those size sites, and then, with the forest bill that was being basically just passed, that basically ups that number, because if I have to reserve a certain percentage, again, if they held it at the 25% for the institution, which was good, but at one time it was getting up to 65% coverage for trees. So there's things that, we look at least I'm looking at it as we start looking at sites, but it all gets back to how the zone is zoned for so many units. What's the carry capacity? Because I can guarantee you I haven't met a developer yet. If you've got 10 acres, zoned R1, they're going to get 10 units on that site. There's a development across the street here that it came for a little bit, fell off a cliff. They were allowed to do a cluster. They took it, put all the 10 homes there, and basically unbuildable where years ago you could have developed them. Because of clustering provisions, there's a lot of properties that were never going to be developed. They couldn't get
So, on the acreage, on the
Everyone
acreage
else
for
does.
school, on the acreage for school, when was the last time that was looked at, outside of the box thinking, say, how do you reduce that?
I actually looked at that, again, Marley Neck area, we were working with a developer to try to give us a site. They tried to say, put it on 8 acres, didn't really work, it's probably more like 10 we need. And then that fell through. You could say planning zone, we thought we had the developer at the table, and next thing the planning zone approved it without our lot, so I lost the site. For future schools. We're still trying to find a site up there, because I have no place to put these kids. And if anybody's been up Marley Neck Boulevard anytime past, you can see the amount of townhomes that have been coming up. We have 900 currently up Marley Neck, over like 900 kids. Solly's about 800, so that gets pretty big for an elementary school. So, we are looking at trying to scale it back. And it gets back to
like planted root people's field to play, right?
right, and part of it is what we try to do, because, our kids are not necessarily using at night, so we do a lot of joint ventures with recreation and parks. So it makes fiscal sense for us to build parking lots in the fields, and then those fields can be used by the community outside versus going out and buying a park.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of benefit to having a bigger school site for those fields, for the community, for the recreation uses. Although, yes, we can jam it down, and the kids can, because like we have schools, at Apples Elementary is on like 2 acres, Delaware about a little over 2. Yes, we can educate children. They don't have there's 300 little feet or 600 feet. And we are now trying to come up with another thing like artificial, not turf, but like a porous surface, because it just cannot handle the little feet. And it's not just our kids, it's the whole neighborhood comes, and although, yes, I can put a 10-foot fence around it, block it, and school's closed, not let anybody in, but again, we want to be good neighbors, and it serves the benefit of the West Annapolis community. So we're trying to find a workaround, and again, that's a small city. So there's lots we can do, and we try to think outside the box.
Well, so Cindy, weren't we told that, we were given numbers to allocate of residential units, but then all of the different departments would then take a look at that and say, well, wait a minute, we can't accommodate that kind of growth in this place. I
Well,
thought that was an
they'll test,
iterative process. What?
they'll test for it. So when we have a proposed land use plan, it will go back and test for impact. So Board of Ed will let us know, based on our land use plans, it might change if we're down zoning properties or up zoning
Not until the
properties.
zoning process.
Well, no, but land use wise, if we're reducing densities in certain areas and increasing densities in others, that will be tested for all kinds of impacts, including schools. So yes, that's part of the process.
Cindy, actually, it's just a question and clarification. How many students, you say, Jen?
We just recently completed the revised study. We did one in 2015, and we just did another one with MPT. And it depends on the area, because you'll see a student generation number in, say, Annapolis is going to be a lot lower than in Suburban Park.
Right.
And the idea is you might have Georgetown East, I might have a 0.06 student per house.
Okay,
Versus Suburban Park, I might have 0.4 kids per house.
that's not my question, I'm sorry.
But that's how you figure out how many homes, because if I said there's, say, if I say a school is, a 500 seat elementary school, you can basically divide that by the yield factor, and that will tell me how many students. So it's about 2,500 to, say, 3,500, depending on where it is.
Oh, that was my question. The document says 3,500 homes will generate the need for an elementary school. I thought I heard you say 25. And that's what I was just trying to find out.
35 is good. 35 is probably, the 35 is based on the overall county average.
It's actually 25 to 35.
Yeah, I would say 25. There are certain areas in this county might be 25. I can tell you there's a townhouse development in Arnold that generated 1.1 kids per house, which is a lot more.
So we'll put it as a range.
Thank you.
That's a range.
We'll put it as a range. Hillary.
I have a series of questions, but in the consideration of time, if you could just real short, basic answers. With the, you said that you required a legislative remedy for overlay zoning. Because planning and zoning and for the administration, did they have some kind of language or concept that they could work from in order to remedy that for you?
Yes, I think there's an existing bill that was passed a couple of years ago with the overlay. All they have to do is go back and rescind the language.
Okay, rescind the language of the previous bill.
And there's
Also,
multiple bills, it's not just one. I think there's multiple ones.
Right, I'm with you. I'm with you. But at the end of the day, you still have protection from adequacy of facilities laws to where you can close an area to development. Is that still active in today's law?
It was, the grandfathering was removed of Bill 1518. However, the council really does need to take it up because the provision that allowed for the testing, what I'm going to say, the modified testing, because the original APF law basically said if a school had a single seat open, a developer could come in with unlimited development.
Okay, I'm with you.
And what the Bill 1518 allowed, basically said, if there is, 100 seats available, they could take no more than 85 of those seats with the development. Actually,
I'm with you.
But council has to, if this GDP, once it passes, that bill extinguishes. So the current council has to remedy the APF law before you guys finish your work.
Right. There are thousands and thousands of acres of federal land, as I think of Fort Meade and all those training areas. Have you made attempts with either our federal delegation or help from the locals to figure out a way to annex some of that to meet local need, particularly where these federal, particularly at Fort Meade, where they provide a huge burden on this county? So have you considered federal land?
We currently have schools that are located on federal property, Meade High School, Meade Middle School, Manor View,
Right.
West Meade, and also
Okay, good.
Pershing Hill. And unfortunately, we had a very good relation with Bert Rice, who is retired. We have not, but I'm going to consider, gotten another relationship like we have with Mr. Rice. And we had talked about looking at the properties that were just off base, because we know we need it. We have
I think that the school board has a need of like $2.1 billion annually for half the county's budget. And we're in a tax cap county. And Kerwin is on the horizon, which is a $10 billion obligation, of which the county, I think, is going to have to woman up on significant expenditures. If Kerwin passes, has there been any kind of preliminary planning, on a finance side of how the county will afford their slice, where we're not compromising, let's say, the police or fire or other necessary public services?
I think there's a lot of issues with Kerwin right now that people aren't sure. I mean, the tax dollar is all going to come from citizens, and the question is.
But we're in a tax cap county.
Correct. And so how is it going to be funded? I think there is a lot of questions that have not been answered. We know we have enough backlog.
So there's been no, like,
at this point,
there's been nobody from, like, the school board coming over to the executive trying to figure out the day after.
They met yesterday and talked about it.
Oh, all right.
So the budget officer is aware of it, and it's still to be determined.
Okay, and my last one is, not to be confused with global warming, but sea level rise is real. And Anne Arundel County has, however you count it, but let's say 435 miles of shoreline. And it's estimated by tons of credible people that in the next 40 years, the tide will rise 1 foot. And as you plan facilities, and not only about where the schoolhouse goes, but the roads that go there, thinking about the flooding of Annapolis downtown and Annapolis Elementary, is this a component of your planning as we look forward 30, 40 years from now and slowly watch the inundation of Anne Arundel County?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I've been on the climate change task force for the past year.
All right, I'm happy.
And this morning I spent 3-4 hours down at the House, building, talking to legislators, the mayors, county executives about climate change. And we look at it, I've looked at our schools, and we should look at it. Fortunately, the good news is all of our schools are dry. There are issues in Shady Side with flooding of roads, Compromise Street down in Annapolis, and certainly anytime we have peninsulas that there's only one way, one in and out, there's issues that we talk to Public Works about. Are there areas, like again, the 450 down here, we have issues with bus service a lot whenever it rains. It used to be just a couple times a year, and I think one year it was 65 times it flooded out, so we're aware of it. And, certainly we're going to keep looking at that.
Thank you.
I just wanted, you're just a wealth of knowledge, and I really appreciate you showing up here tonight.
Cindy told me to.
I'm really impressed. My comment about better models and simulations.
Sorry, better models, yes.
What I realize in hearing you talk now is you sound like you do, and correct me if I'm wrong, you do have the tools, the modeling tools and the simulating tools to calculate numbers, but you're trying to hit a moving target. For example, when the county spot zone a lot and doubles the number of houses, you have no way to factor that in quickly into your model.
Well, what we typically do is we get every year from the state, we actually get for birth rates. So we'll know who was born 5 years ago. So we have that information from basically from, yes, I'm gonna say yesterday, 5 years ago. So we know theoretically who could become a kindergartner. I have no idea who's gonna be born tomorrow. So again, when you look at our 10-year master plan, it's like the 5 years, we have an idea who's gonna be there. But after that, a lot of times what you'll see a lot in the projections, when you look at our overall, our 10-year master plan, they basically, the curve goes up and it flattens. And the reason it flattens is because, say if I know there's so many kindergartners or basically 5th grade or 5-year-olds that are born, I know that number. So we just don't know what the next year is gonna be, so we end up holding those kindergartners flat. Now, we have that information to start with. We have actual enrollment count. And the other thing we try to do is we work with planning and zoning. They do provide us the subdivision. So if somebody comes with a large subdivision, we actually calculate based on the student yields of those areas. We say how many students are going to be generated. And we also communicate with the development community to find out what is their build rate. Because there may be 1,000 homes projected, but they're not going to sell them all day one. We know that it's going to be maybe 100 homes a year, and we certainly work with the development community, and they provide us, and again, Bill's been very good, out Two Rivers, they've been doing very well out there, but we see the sales pace, we talk to them to try to figure out, when should we envision students showing up, and we basically overlay that into our projections. So there's a lot of assumptions that are made because we assume a certain build rate, but what we'll do is, because we do the master plan every single year, we actually will say, well, we thought we were going to get students from this development, but because of the economy, we didn't get any, so then we back off that. So you'll see actual numbers sometimes in our projections where we said there might be, say 100 kids in 5th grade, and all of a sudden you see, wait a minute, that dropped. And well, it dropped because the development didn't happen or somebody moved. There's a lot of things that happen with families that we cannot predict. When you start talking 85,000 students, there's a lot of dynamics. So, it's an art as much as it is a science.
Okay, we're gonna keep going here, but go ahead, Ellen, quickly.
I have 2 questions. One, you brought up the relationship with Record Parks. Do you have any kind of formal partnership? Logan County at one time in the past always did, so that their school property and their recreation property was looked at comprehensively, and even recreation parks would have an office in the school building, for the promotion of sports in the community and neighborhood. So do you do anything in terms of partnership?
That's with Anne Arundel County, not Baltimore County.
No.
Anne
That
Arundel
was a
County.
program in Baltimore.
Right.
I
No,
don't know
we
what-
do, matter of fact, we do things with, like expanded gymnasiums, for example, so they can work for the older kids, like middle school and an elementary school.
Well,
We do the SAC program, we give them space like rooms for before and after care that's run by Lincoln Parks. We also, whenever we can, we try to partner with them on acquisition of land. Matter of fact, a piece of property was bought up in the Pasadena area off of Elberton Road. It's a 72-acre site. I was looking at more for an elementary school, but it makes sense for the county to acquire it in 72 acres. It can be used as a park as well as.
I mentioned that for one reason, because looking within the city of Annapolis, the second question is about that, there are a lot of there are a lot of fields that are county property.
All of
that
them
are,
are.
yes.
City owns really only one.
But they're also not well maintained.
That's
They're
correct.
very poorly maintained. And that is an issue that needs somehow or other be corrected, whether that agreement needs to be with the city recreation and parks.
It is. City recreation
Well,
parks.
then my next question follows, the communication or the effort to make that happen. That's one. And 2, there's the whole issue of safe schools. Who's responsible for paying for the sidewalks that are related to, safe schools? Higher price being one.
We appreciate that, but we're not gonna determine that in this GBP. So you can take that as a sidewalk.
It is an issue, though, that relates to a healthy community.
Who
I
pays
don't have-
for it is not an issue.
It is not?
Having safe sidewalks is an issue.
And
But it's
yes,
not
having
up to us.
sidewalks is an issue, and is it an issue for us or is it not?
Are you talking safe routes to school?
Yes,
program?
safe routes to school, exactly.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to let you know, a quick answer, yes, Public Works, the schools, we communicate all the time about where we need sidewalk extensions, because keep in mind, a school bus costs about $100,000 a year. So if I can put a sidewalk in, I'm gonna save you taxpayers money.
Bill,
Okay, so that's, you
Yeah.
know, that's.
The only thing more controversial than rezoning is redistricting.
I love it. Do it next Wednesday if anybody wants to come out.
Well, I don't envy you on that, but it is a big part of the conversation when it comes to capacity and, you know, development capacity, school capacity and so forth. Can you speak a bit to that? Because it's a difficult thing, but yet probably sometimes a necessary.
Yeah, one of the things, before we can even ask for money from the state of Maryland, first thing they ask us, have you redistricted? Because if you look at our actual formula, funding formula, we have to list all adjacent schools. And the state really doesn't care if it's in a different field. They say there are seats, if I happen to be in Broadneck, and there are seats available in Severna Park, and I want to add on to Broadneck, say high school, they would make me look at these seats, and they actually will subtract. If I have, say, 300 seats available, and I come in, I say, I want to do a 300 seat addition, they subtract the two and say, you're eligible for no money. So redistricting is the first option we have to do. Matter of fact, next Wednesday, we're talking about a Broadneck redistricting. We want to move to about 100 students, roughly. And I can tell you it's a very emotional thing. I think people buy homes. I mean, I've gone through quite a few redistricting. It's one of the biggest thankless jobs that I do, that it makes no one happy. People who live there aren't happy. I can tell you the elected officials are not happy because of the calls that come in. But again, that's something we have to do before we try to spend dollars. So we try to balance it. The other thing we do with the redistricting is, you know, again, like Annapolis, we went through a big redistricting. Here, we're, you know, legacy type of redistricting that was done back in the 70s, and certain neighborhoods were bused. We had neighborhoods being bused with 7 different schools. Per the committee's recommendation, we got rid of a lot of that busing. We went to what's called like a neighborhood school. Started with the school, we kind of worked out from that. Whoever could walk to school could. Once you get beyond that, you're on a bus, whether you take a left or a right, you're going. So that's how Annapolis was done. It went very well. I mean, I had a committee of 32 people, and I had a unanimous decision on the plan, which is unheard of. But it was a lot of work.
the multi-tier approach, that's what we're looking at. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. One more quick question.
One very comment, it's a comment, you don't even have to answer it, although, because it's not your department. The state says that when a school reaches 110% capacity, which we're talking about seats, the program will begin to deteriorate. Anne Arundel County has, I don't know if it's a policy or just a practice, I've never figured it out, of when a school gets overcrowded, adding classrooms only. What they're doing, in my opinion, is building a permanent portable. And they don't touch the core of the school at all. This diminishes the program. The children who live in areas that are severely overcrowded are receiving a diminished program than they should in Anne Arundel County. It's not your department, but if it ever comes up, I'd just like to say, I would like to see.
It is my department.
Okay, then I will just make the comment, I would like to see that policy change.
Yeah, we have revisited that. I can tell you, in the last 10 years, there were a lot of, I'm gonna say, either K additions or little classroom additions we did, and we did not really look at the core because the money was very specific for the addition only. We didn't even look at parking spaces. So here you are adding 10 teachers and you have no parking spaces. So we have revisited that to try to correct that and basically ask for that additional money.
Revisited it, but not changed. I'm sorry, I didn't need to have discussion, I just didn't want to let that go.
That's good. I appreciate that. We're on page 12 of 45. Let's move on.
Can I ask one clarification, Elizabeth? I may have missed it when I was late, but you've been a wealth of information, but I have no idea who you are. Could you identify yourself, please?
I'm Craig Stewart, I'm the Senior Manager of Planning, and if you have any specific questions that I did not answer, my email is gstewart@aacps.org,
How do you spell Stewart?
Scotty, S-T-E-W-A-R-T.
And he gave the background report. So all that information is not only online, it should be in your notebook, because he was here speaking to some of us twice, the old committee and the new committee. So, it's online. Let's move on.
All right, so page 11, there were some comments about the community college that I wanted to defer until the community college can be here, at your meeting on February 5th. There's a comment on page 12, just to add the word safe, that's fine, when talking about, having safe learning experiences in our libraries. Page 13, Rudy, maybe you can speak to this. The comment is there's inconsistent among county library staff should be just as engaging at each facility. Rules and layout should reflect safe best practices along with a welcoming experience, proper inviting signage, and aesthetics need to be a consistent and look.
So all that comes right, all that is answered directly with our new facilities master plan. We agree completely with the comments.
Speak up, sir, because we're being taped.
We agree completely with those comments. That is core to what we are trying to do in the new libraries. We have currently in our budget about $350,000 per year for library repair and renovation, and that money is directly addressing those issues. So the signage and whatever we can do inside the building that is not structural is addressed by those. Whenever the building comes up for a full-scale renovation, which is in our capital plan, we take all those into account when we design the building's layout for the new master plan. The comment about staff engaging at each facility, that is our brand. That's what we try to do, and but we are people. And of course, every branch does have its own particular quirks. I would encourage you, if you run into one of those situations at your neighborhood branch, to engage the branch manager, and they will correct it on the spot. And if that doesn't get addressed, please let us know, and we'll take care of it our end too.
Great, thank you.
Can you address the next comment too about, just about the, seems to be.
Oh, the funding?
Yes.
So we believe we have a robust and a doable capital improvement plan. We briefed it to the capital oversight committee yesterday, and we're waiting for their comments and their feedback on it. The initial impression is that they are supportive of what we've done. We will get us to our goal of 0.55 gross square feet per capita by 2025, if it's approved. So fingers crossed on that. The other comment about examining office spaces, we are doing that aggressively. Right now, as a matter of fact, on February 17th, we'll see the reopening of Discovery's library, the library at the mall. It's a library in a commercial space, and we are able to bring now 12,000 extra square feet of library space into the system at a very, very reasonable cost, and that will be opening up soon. With the Glen Burnie project, for example, we also ran through exhaustive search for commercial properties to try and purchase another lot that would be available or suitable for that library. We also looked at rental facilities, renting commercial space in that area. Unfortunately, we're not able to find a suitable space that would come in under budget. So we are sticking with the original plan for Glen Burnie and complete building on the site as it is.
Thank you. That's good.
I just have one more question, because you're minus X number of square feet.
Yes.
But do you count now the new commercial space into your, or is it just add-on? I mean,
No,
not add-on.
no, it is counted in our gross square footage in our deficit. So I mean, that's those numbers that we turned in. But slightly, but still an improvement.
I have a question. The one thing I noticed in reading the whole report was that you concentrated on a number from a 2017 report that talked about 0.55 gross square feet of library space per capita. And that's great, but that's just a piece of floor top. So what I noticed in our public safety folks, they actually talked about not only the facilities, but the people that make it work. So I don't see anything in yours section of this document that says, in addition to square foot per capita, some number that tells me how many staff need to be put in there.
There isn't in the report that we turned in, no. Part of the capital improvement plan is when we ask for a new library space, we also ask for staffing to go along with it. For instance, the request this year is a request for a new library in the Millersville area. That will go a long way toward addressing the gross square foot deficiency. We have modeled that 32,000 square foot based on experiences, not just in Anne Arundel County, at Wilmington, for instance, and at but also other libraries throughout Maryland. The staffing model that we use isn't based directly on the square footage per staff. It's more based on the type of service that we provide and the security that we need to provide. Actually, bottom line, the security we need to provide for that building. So during the operating hours of the building, how long the building is open is a more direct driver to how many people that we need to cover that space. For instance,
Sir, if you don't mind, if you can come up here and speak louder, because I'm getting comments that people aren't able to hear you or see you. That'd be great, thank you.
So, for instance, our staffing model calls for currently for a minimum of 3 people in the library during operating hours. So we spread that out over how many hours the library is open during the week, and we come up with an estimate for just a base model, base number of people that we need to have the library open. Into that we add what we anticipate the programming level is going to be. We move up and down the number of additional library staff that will be doing those programs. That's what drives our staffing level. It's actually the number of hours at the library. So,
and then the other thing, just to add on to, another department talks about, in addition to staffing that they've included in this document, they've also talked about training, how you train people. And I think in your section you talk about, maybe you didn't use exact words, but a new mission. Bring this up to the state of the art in terms of STEM and technology and supporting that, and all the other magnitude of things you guys are now providing to the community. So I'm a little concerned about, are you factoring in the new mission and the requirements that's going to bring to the table for staffing and for facility size?
we are. So the short answer is, when we looked at our participation in this development plan, we were looking strictly from physical plant point of view, or looking more at physical plant point of view. There are other documents that support what we provided for in this development plan. In fact, when I saw the vision and the themes that came out of this committee, it dovetailed almost perfectly with our brand new strategy. So it gave us a really clear roadmap of how to develop our strategies for meeting the themes that were in this document. So the training and the refactoring, the reshaping of the staff, we talk about that in our strategy, in our 2022 strategy. It can be provided as an appendix to this document, or however this committee wants to see it. But we do address that in those other documents, or supporting documents. So there's other homework that didn't come to the fore when we provided our input to this document.
That might be useful.
I will,
I can
yes.
forward it to them and use it in the document.
That'd be great. Thank you. I
One other,
appreciate that.
one other thing is that someone else in the community college talks about what the value is to the community. So I think their statement was $1 invested gives a net value of $2.65. Do you have any numbers like that? I was not able to find a number like that.
We do. There's a traditional model like that where every dollar you put in, you monetize the services that you get out of it.
I think the national average was about $5.
Yeah.
She'll send it to Cindy and then we
Okay.
can distribute it.
Last time we did it in 2017, it was $6. For every dollar in, you get $6.41 in service to provide.
Well,
Great,
congratulations, that's better than national average.
Ellen,
the National After School Program, looked at how they could do some innovative things in libraries and ensure that more people would be participatory in those programs, particularly seniors or people that were in high school. One of the things that they found that really enhanced the use of the library was that there was a comfortable area, a cafe, actually. So are those issues in your planning process for your new?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the New Annapolis Library has a cafe and a warm company space available for you. You can come in and have your lunch there, bring your own food in there, or get something out of the vending machine there. We've relaxed very significantly those old school rules about food in the library, so we want to make that library a gathering place for people. It's the modern resilience center. It's where the community goes to make community, and that's what we're trying to perform at that library. And that is reflected also at Riviera Beach. At Severn, when that reopens, that has a new cafe also built into it. It's part of our model there.
Are you able to measure increased use at all?
Well,
It's too new.
It's too new. It's unique. It hasn't opened yet. But as soon as it does, you'll see. The building is 30% larger than what it was before. Almost all of that space is pure public meeting space. It's just for people to come and be there.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Okay,
Page 16, there's a comment related to the health department, about providing, with one mobile facility which reflects the different, county locations throughout the week. Jennifer or Ann, do you wanna?
So,
Can you please stand up and come in front of the camera and speak loudly?
Yep.
Thank you.
I'm speaking loud. My name is Jennifer Schneider. I'm the Deputy Director for the Bureau of Disease Prevention and Management at the Health Department, or the Department of Health. So currently we already have a mobile unit. It's called Maryland Mobile Wellness. Currently, right now, we have the facility in the northern part of the county 2 days a week. We are working with partners to explore other options, other locations to bring this great asset. Currently, our next, it's in discussion working with partners to move it to Annapolis City. And then from there, we will look into expanding to other options. So that is very much in all of our minds, the other needs throughout the county.
Page 18. Yeah, it helps as well, but I believe this one is a strategy noted, referring to, food deserts, and there's strategies in that we'll get to in a little bit that require, there's already strategies that cover this concept.
Are you going to talk about the desert comment later on?
Well, we're here now, page 19, the comment was, this is
So it's a retail area that's surprising to be considered a desert.
in which area of the county are you
Okay, we're
referring?
talking about the north of Millersville. You're basically going on Veterans Highway up Crane Highway and Ritchie Highway for everything that is highlighted up there. And I'm really surprised. I know it's a half mile, but I'm surprised it's considered a desert because it's heavily retail. That's my comment.
And do you want to speak to that?
So
this map, what this map is referring to?
if I can understand your question specifically, it's asking about the food desert areas.
Well, I'm just wondering why it's considered that.
It's a formula.
Yeah.
I think on the bottom it states how that was received.
It's a half mile.
There's a data
radius.
source
Yeah.
on the bottom, and it's a formulaic determination. And if you look at the date on it, it's a moving target, much like numbers always are. So I don't see the date on this one unless it's at the top.
2018.
Sorry, I'm having a hard time with this.
2018.
It might be a 2018 copy, so it's probably shifted even more since this was mapped out.
It's been built up more, is my point.
No, sir. So based on the formula, it's the distance between maybe a house has and a food source. So that's part of the definition. It's not necessarily that there's a,
It's walking distance is the point. It's allowing people to have a half-mile walking distance to some kind of store. Is that what we're talking
a
about?
food source.
Yeah.
So not necessarily other retail or clothing, it specifically addresses food sources. A lot of the work that we're doing is in the north, where you would think, but I think even another comment on was that some of the retail is actually closing, so families are having less access to food sources in a certain distance, urban versus suburban.
So, by food source, are you referring to grocery stores or restaurants or both?
So most of the time, it's not considered like a fast food restaurant, but more a retail that you can purchase food like a grocery store.
Like a grocery
Or
store.
a food
Or-
source.
It's not a McDonald's, okay.
It's, what I wants to walk to a restaurant, to the, field of live orange, so why is that all blue?
I think that comment was made previously on one of our presentation days. So we are not referring in this, our epidemiologists did this work, and they were not looking at spaces that were uninhabited or target range. They were looking at the distance and formula based on the data that's provided, which is housing in relation to food sources, not target ranges.
I mean, it's misleading if you know the area, you say, what's this all about?
Okay.
Because
Moving on to page 21, thank you.
John, you had a comment about where does the ramp of Fort Smallwood figure into the discussion
Yeah.
about the different, and it's part of that paragraph. We didn't call out specifically all of the different boat ramps and water access facilities.
Well, it's because it says the county does not operate or manage these community or commercial facilities, but the county operates a boat ramp at Fort Smallwood Park. So my thought was,
Well, that's referring to the previous, in addition, there are 303 commercial and community improvements with nearly 12,035 boats.
yeah, I was just looking for it in the content. I didn't see that there was a reference to anything like that.
It's referring in the many neighborhoods, yes. Yeah.
I would think Parks and Rec would have to define that.
Yeah, and Park and Rec, I'm gonna defer some of the comments for them, until the February 5th meeting. They've had some turnover in staff, and so they will be coming, in a couple of weeks to discuss their goals, policy strategies, and any comments you have related to their.
Okay, so let's skip forward to page 26. Come back to Park and Rec. And there's no comment on that. We're gonna go down to 29.
Waste management, this was a major complaint that is heard that, work according to location often contribute to ongoing problems. So I think, as we noted in previously the background report presentation from waste management, that if you have a complaint about the service, then you contact waste management services. This really isn't an issue that's for the DEP.
Okay, keeping going.
It's just noted, alleviation of crime starts with aesthetics and a sense of pride.
So there's 35, we're going down to shelters. This was a issue for.
Page 34, you did note, we do agree, Charlie's operating budget is correct. 35, we have, so again, OEM is in transition, so we have to get in contact once they are staffed again. We'll, this was from the old report, so I can't speak to, this directly. We'll have to get back to you on that.
Cindy, are you saying that the section where the OEM is gonna be updated at some point? Is that what I'm hearing?
Which,
I
not
see
updated,
a
but
lot
any
of red
questions
flags.
that you have, that, so this information, some of it may need to be updated.
So 36
Talking
can
about
be
the
answered
shelters.
by that as well. So 37, same thing.
With the warming and cooling centers.
Great.
And the dams, we do know there's 23 dams, but.
So then down to the policy on page 39.
So Kate, you had asked reordering it, I agree, that sounds much better. I think that was good. For the first policy, we're fine with that. Second, comment about, I guess, strategy A, saying will instead of should, that's good, good text there. And then rewording, strategy B to say increase the supply and or capacity of facilities by first studying the feasibility of enhancing existing county assets rather than developing new assets, and then implement the recommendations of feasibility.
Oh, sorry, Ellen.
I commented on this section. I didn't, I'm trying to see whether you made any adjustments to
Well,
my
not for
comments or not.
feasible-
But my comments were this, and it goes to what Gary's talking about, when you have to go to court from 2022. Every time you add in a weasel word, if feasible, if feasible, if feasible, it opens the door to anything. And those words, it's either a strategy, it is, or it isn't. It is either a goal or it isn't. And the infeasible words are just weasel words that make everything else go away. And I suggested that you can cut those words out.
But I disagree,
Well,
because,
it could disagree, and I
well,
understand.
because, and the reason being, because before we spend capital dollars, we're going to study the feasibility of whether or not that particular strategy, because this is an
It
idea.
isn't the feasibility of the issue. It is, we will do this, and HO1, the first one is, this is what we will do if feasible. Well,
And
that's not a
that's
feasibility
implying-
study. That says, maybe we'll do it, maybe we won't. And basically, it's a weasel word that allows
It's not a
everything to go
maybe
somewhere.
we will, maybe we won't, it's a maybe if, when
So that's
studied.
that's my point, and I understand you're free to reject. That is totally different from feasibility study.
Results of that, they say, look, if you go any further, say, yeah, or nay.
Yes.
But if you put it, if feasible, it provides a conflict of I'm Phil. I was talking to,
Okay, we'll come back to that because if we need to go back to that. So let's go to,
I would like, if you're going back, that's great, because I have some comments on that particular
okay,
wording.
skipping forward from 39, we've got 40, 41. We talked about how many county buildings are there and why pick 132? Your goal.
Well, we have HC2D reworded,
You're on 41, page 41, goal,
right, but they don't know that. It says it. Okay, well, if they're not, they haven't listed it. So, yeah, page 39, rewording. Ensure sufficient capacity exists prior to new development approvals, by further evaluating the county's adequate public facilities ordinance. Right there, 39, FD.
Isn't there a working group, starting on that right now? Maybe TFOs?
Yes, there's a couple of working groups.
Yeah.
So does that speak to the emphasis that you were getting at by shifting it to ensure sufficient capacity exists? Okay. Checking. Department of Aging. How many county buildings are there and why pick 132?
No problem. Hi, Carissa Gowan, Deputy Director of Department of Aging and Disabilities. So back in FY 20, we had asked for monies in order to hire an ADA consultant and A&E specialist to look at all of county government buildings. So in addition to our programs and services, we also house the ADA coordinator, which assures that all county government is accessible in accordance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So we worked together with Central Services and identified 132 buildings that were most frequented by the public. So I can't speak to the amount of county buildings that there are. That would be a Central Services question. But we wanted to utilize those funds and that consultant to look at the most frequented places outside of recs and parks. So this is not considered with recs and parks. So we wouldn't consider buildings such as an FMV storage facility. So we would consider a customer service center. And this is phase 1 of looking at the ADA self-evaluation.
So no.
Okay.
But thank you.
Sure.
The question for me was, it felt arbitrary. So something was used to determine 132 out of X number of buildings.
Right. So we did do a matrix with Central Services to look at each individual building to determine, is this building accessible, or is this building at all frequented by a public entity where we would have to look at its accessibility factors.
I think the just wants a reference there to how we arrived at 132.
Right.
So we worked together with the.
No, she's saying add it in there that you
Yeah,
did
I
a
think
survey. Just put in parentheses, survey done,
Based on
whatever.
blah, blah, blah.
Oh, okay.
So
All
it
right.
doesn't
So
feel
we
like
just need to add
somebody
it
went,
in.
oh, 132 is a good number today.
No, we worked together.
You went through a process.
Right. Yes, we had a process.
So
Is that it?
that's all I want, is some reference to it.
Yeah.
I have a question. Just for clarification, you're looking at buildings for uses for what?
So we are doing a self-evaluation of county government buildings to make sure they're accessible to our public. So in phase 1 of that plan, we need to look at the buildings. It made sense to work with the Office of Central Services, and we did have a process to look at the buildings that were most frequented by the public.
Well, I was asked to come here, I was talking to the district.
Can you speak up, please?
I'm sorry, I'm a soft spoken. I'm Phil Green, I'm a resident here in the county in South South County, and I brought up a question to several people, the delegate Stephen Howard and some senator, people in the public service office. Sorry, I don't know the names, I'm just getting started.
Senator El,
Anyways, I brought up the question, and not far from where I live, there's an old abandoned special needs school that was put up in the 60s, and I'm hoping that's in your list of things, and I thought maybe.
So that would be the schools?
Huh?
That would be in this?
Well, what has happened since?
Sir, I appreciate all that. Unfortunately, we have to keep going. If
Okay,
you want to
we can talk
connect afterwards, that would be great.
And actually, I'm not gonna be available afterwards, but I can give you my contact information.
Okay, and I'm not sure who your representative is on this committee, but
Here
you
in
can
South
also
County,
go,
it's
you can also go through Kate. Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, so then we're on, goal HC6. And Kate, you had a question about,
Yeah, this is for the health department, and talking about the economic climate. How can we state that the economic climate will do this, our policies and we can control them, but we can't control the economy?
So in this context, the language, or the term economic climate doesn't refer to sort of uncontrollable, but just what can we do, what policies can we pass to support local economic climate for accessible and sustainable food systems. But if the interpretation is the true definition, we can certainly take it out. I think it's still a strong goal without climate, if that muddies what we're trying to say a little bit too much.
Either that or perhaps recast it. We can talk about how to do that. It just, for me, said we're gonna do something we have no control over. And I don't wanna set us up for failure.
So this language is specifically taken from the Maryland Food Charter. But again, if you're having a question over it and it sounds that way, then it's still strong without that language.
Right.
It's still talking about policies that support food access.
Absolutely.
So we wanted to say policies will support diverse and delete and an economic climate.
Yes.
okay? Okay, great, thank you.
I have on HC 6.1. The thing that came to mind to me was concern about quality food, healthy food. How about encouraging gardening skills being taught in the schools or outreach in their department or the library, and then establishing a policy or strategy of including gardening spaces within future developments, so that the citizens and those living in that development can actually raise healthy vegetables themselves on site.
You're looking at, okay, so,
When I was reading 6.1, I said, you know, if we want to encourage healthy consumption, why not encourage growing by the citizens? It's worked in other locales where the vacant lots are turned into community gardens and that type of thing. Why not formalize it as something that we would expect a development to include, just like a playground would be included?
So that is actually included, C, under implementing strategies to permit community or nonprofit gardens to grow produce consumption.
But I want to take it a step further and say, when we put together the requirements for a development, that they include, like we include a playground, small, but we at least include it, and now we include a space for the residents to have a garden. And then we have outreach programs after school, in school, library, whatever, your department, in which teach teach the community how to raise.
So are you talking about housing that has no land? Because we worked really closely with Cindy and her group. Gardens are allowed on property in Anne Arundel
I'm
County.
saying more than just allowed, because it takes away from some gardens.
I'm just saying anyone's permitted to grow on their own property. So I asked whether you are distinguishing between housing that has property and housing that doesn't have property that could accommodate a garden.
Well, at this point, I'm looking at future developments where.
With no land.
Where the land is totally built on. It's either blacktop or it's a building. And then in the future that we would strongly suggest that space be allocated for the residents in that particular development to have a place to have a garden.
I think what we're interested in is maybe some help with what kind of language you would want added to that, because I feel that right now there's a little bit of that, including land trust property. I know Reckham Parks is, I don't know if Reckham Parks is here today.
So they're not.
They're setting aside, they have set aside, and then also the community development block grant. So maybe if you just have specific language, or maybe we could talk about what additional language that you would want there.
I mean, I can try to come up with something, probably need the professionals to help them.
Gary, I think this would be better at the region plan level when we get to, specific region plans and overlaying that with our food desert map and maybe areas, that can be identified.
I think this issue has to be held as more of a county-wide issue, not a region. I mean, for example, I can tell you in Jessup, but everything's been built on, or at least a lot of it's already been built on.
And in addition, and I think we talked about this in response to another comment, having the identify sustainable policy structures for Anne Arundel County to support healthy food access, that is another aspect or solution. So you're, a piece of the puzzle is land to garden on, and I know that's happening in a variety of ways through a variety of agencies and organizations across the county. But putting into place, it sounds like to me, more policy, and that's what we've suggested to be another implementation or strategy to look at what policies would help create access. One, whether it's gardens; two, whether it's tax incentives; three, whether it's pantries and grocery stores that are available. So I think that's something later on down the line.
So HC 6.2 identifies sustainable policies.
Yep.
Okay. So
Sorry,
we
I
have
didn't see it. I didn't see it further down there, Cindy. Thank you.
Where
As
is
a policy, but it could be a strategy too, so here's something that we do.
Yep, I see that. Yep.
And that could be couched, Gary, not as requirements, but as an encouragement or, as encouraging developers to consider the value as a strategy.
I think it addresses healthy food, it addresses a pleasant community to live in, so it addresses a lot of issues that have been brought up in this document at this point. So a place that you can enjoy and teach your kids about growing food and outside, it has a lot of benefits just other than putting food on the table.
Noted. Thank you.
And do you think that policy HC 6.2 should be strategy H then? Should be a strategy instead of a policy, and then.
You're asking me?
No,
sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of it.
Should be the strategy instead of a policy. Instead of policy HC 6.2, should we change that to be a strategy?
Yeah. Number.
Yes. Yes.
Item H.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chairman,
Speak up.
I don't know if some of these things are going to take some reflective thought. Like, it's all good and well to have a community garden, but there are other school objectives, like, for example, creating an attractive nuisance that creates a problem for a schoolhouse. Or people who come and go out of the community garden on school property, are these people vetted? You know, in Anne Arundel County today, you can't be a chaperone unless you are fingerprinted and background checked by the state police. And so on the one hand, I like the idea of the community garden. However, this idea has to be vetted with the schoolhouse before we make it part of a broad plan that we're pushing out the door. And so on the one hand, I like the idea, but there are some other things that need to be thought out about, what the downside could be for a school site.
And you're talking school site, I think we're talking general in county.
I'm
So,
talking,
and
well,
can we comment
he
on-
was talking about that that we would encourage the Anne Arundel County Public Schools to include large land playground.
No, that's not what I was saying. I was saying that would be a educational program, either during this day or after school, along with all the other branches of the government that do outreach to teach and encourage people to raise vegetables.
Right.
There are lots of places that do
I'm
this.
saying that if we're gonna put our seal on it, we need to vet this stuff.
Okay, I appreciate
to
that.
evaluate the feasibility, right?
Yeah.
They just said they didn't want that.
Well, now, that feasibility is a dual word, okay? On the one hand, if you're using it to study, that's fine and good. But if you put as feasible as a standard, you now have created a 1 mile wide hole. And the way it comes is that it'll be a legal contest and the code will be silent. And then they will look to the GDP for legislative intent, and there you will have your hole. I'll calm down. Okay. Sorry.
The next one is regarding the word high quality. It wasn't meant to have the reverse of low quality, but in your vision themes, you talk about, you use qualitative words that talk about more than just the minimum, being the best place. So it's more than.
It's just stressing it.
It's just stressing.
That we want, that is one of our priorities.
You want to take it out.
Environment.
It's fine with me. It's just kind of stressing that we want more than just the minimum, to meet the minimum requirements of state law. But I do think like some of the words, so provide a high quality park system that serves the needs of all county residents and maybe make that more clear.
Okay, thank you. Page 43.
This one refers to.
You're okay with this, the programs,
Yeah.
expanded programs with new markets are identified, got it?
Well, I just want to make sure waste management. So it's adding to the strategy that says continue to explore and research emerging markets for recycling materials not currently accepted within existing programs, and add and expand programs as new markets are identified.
Yeah, that's, as long as it's feasible. Now this program is this, I think it's one specific to when we talked about, getting all our programs curbside or at our facilities, and we do that all the time. Recently, I started Food Scraps because we partnered with Prince George's County, and they're allowing us to bring 2,000 tons a year of food scraps to their facility, which is the only facility in our area that is permitted for food scraps. So we're looking to do that. We've got it at Millersville, Severance, we used to call it Recycling Center. We're going to expand it down to Deal and Glen Burnie soon. So yeah, whenever we see something new that we can collect either at the curb or at our facilities to lessen what has to be landfill, we look at it strong. So one of the things, other things we're looking at, you guys are reading about glass, mixed broken glass, and areas are getting rid of it out of the curbside program. We're not looking at getting rid of it, but we're looking at developing a drop-off opportunity for drop-off glass, color separated, clear, green, brown, and actually will go from bottle to bottle. With mixed broken glass, it's very tough to do, and it could generate revenue. So it's instead of right now, mixed broken glass is a negative $40 per ton in our program. Be collected at the curb, get a negative cost, whereas we get drop off. We're always looking for that. So, and we'll expand it as long as it's feasible. And it's feasible means, you know, proximity. Can it be transported? Is there a buyer in the region that would want it? Is there a recycler, a processor that can take it? And even if it's at a cost, because you know these composting food scrap, that costs us $47.50 a ton. But it's a worthwhile cost.
How much would it cost you to landfill that?
Landfill the food scraps?
Yeah, like, is it a cost savings by?
Yes, yes, and one of the heaviest things, that's one of our pitches, one of the heaviest things in residential trash is food waste. There's a lot of liquid in food waste. So that's our pitch. You know, we've been able to keep our fee of $298 a year at that level since 2012. And that could change, but one of the things that we can do is minimize disposal costs by taking heavy stuff out of the mix. So and it's also going to beneficial use instead of going into the ground.
Is there any outreach to the schools to work on those disposables, those food items that could be collected and sorted out to be?
Kicker with the schools, they have to have someplace to take it. Like Washington D.C. is doing a review of their elementary schools, but they've got a program with Prince George's County, Prince George's Living Partner. So there's got to be a facility to take it to. And new composting regulations that went into effect a couple years back, where you have to be to certain tiers in order to accept that material. Our facility in Millersville is a tier 1. We can accept grass and leaves. We are not set up for stormwater management, all of the other things that have to be involved when you add that food scrap component to the mix. But we talk to them, one thing we hit with them is reduce. You know, buy only what you need, minimize your waste. That's one thing we hit hard with the schools. We also promote backyard composting. We partner with the Master Gardeners program here. They're a great source. They can help with that garden idea that you got going on there. So encouraging them to deal with the material at home, minimize disposal, and create a beneficial product.
I have one other question too. One of the things I think was evident when things changed a few years back was when we got to the point that the plastic wrappers for, say, 6-packs and for straws and stuff along that line, is there new equipment, different equipment, or technologies on the horizon that would allow us to recycle that instead of it going into the landfill?
Plastic film, grocery bags.
Yes.
That was the one product that we had to remove from our curbside program. 2 reasons. One, residents weren't adhering to our instruction with those, which was to put a bunch of them into one, tie it closed, so it could be pulled off at the beginning of the line. They're going in individually. They're getting wrapped around all the components and create a big issue. But that wasn't the main reason it went away. The main reason it went away is the main buyer of it is plastic furniture or plastic deck companies. They love it. They use a lot of it, but it has to be clean and dry. When you put that stuff in the curbside with all the other recyclables, that's impossible to do. We had drop off at our facilities though. All 3 of our recycling centers drop off. Grocery stores take it. So, there's still an opportunity to recycle that. And most people go to the grocery store, so what we ask people when they come to our facilities, throw a bag in your car, and go to one of those locations, there's a bin right there, easily accessible. So it can be recycled, just not at the curb. Down the road, unless they can figure out that cleanliness thing, I doubt it. As a curbside product.
Maybe. So, Brody, are you telling me that what I should be doing is putting all of my food waste down by garbage disposal?
No.
Instead of in the trash? You should be composting it.
No, I'm saying there's other ways to do it instead of put down your garbage. Utilities love it if they didn't.
But you said you don't want it in the trash, right?
I'd rather you not put it in the trash. I'd rather you, if you had a little pail, we give away pails that you use on your countertop. Put those little pails in, have a 5-gallon bucket in your garage or outside, hop on it, keep all the rodents out.
I did not know that.
And then put it in your car and bring it to us in your truck. Or compost in your backyard. We give away free compost bins at Deal, Millersville, and our office here in the
You have a new customer. Thank you. I should, okay, page 44. 44. We gotta keep going, guys. 44. You can talk to him afterwards. 43. Go ahead, Gary. Sorry, I'm talking to her, not you.
On 41, 6.1 goal, no, wait a minute. No, it's on, I'm sorry, 42 on 7.1 on trails. My only comment there was, it's not in the document because I missed the date, but my comment there was better coordination between MDOT, the county roads and other routes. What I saw was a terrible missed opportunity in the Overton, Boone County area of where the trail was placed. The trail, we had businesses.
Okay, hold that thought, because Rexham Park isn't here.
You'll get an
So,
opportunity
on
to
February
comment.
5th.
Okay.
So in the meantime, you can make your comment, because I know you didn't get to do it in time, and I'll go over that in just a second. So,
So back on 43, also related to, waste management, talking, Kate, do you wanna, yeah, it's your comment, sorry. It's your comment about, maximize the life expectancy of the Millersville landfill and delay replacement long into the future. And you say as long as feasible?
So as long as the teacher just sort of felt, if they're saying that's the feasibility thing.
I mean, that comment is, right now, Millersville is the only active open landfill in the county. The Board of Education, we were talking earlier about the difficulty of siting the school, difficulty of siting a landfill after this one goes up. We're very hard. So, it's an asset, we look at it as an asset, we want to put in the ground, only what should go into the ground, we want to recycle, reuse, reduce, do all of that before we have to get to that situation, so we're trying to just push it out, by all the different strategies, all the different action items.
perfect, thank you.
And so then, related to that, were all the strategies. Don, can you scroll up some?
Before you go there, just one pitch. This gentleman is giving a presentation next Tuesday night at CERC at 7 o'clock on what's happening in recycling in the county. If you really want your questions answered in detail, come to CERC, 7 o'clock on Tuesday.
I'll add on to that. He came out to Jessup and give a fantastic presentation. So I would highly recommend inviting him to your Civic Association meetings.
And I will add on to that.
Okay, go ahead.
So it's, then again, regarding all these strategies, the comment is, these all sound like great strategies, but they also feel collectively like a heavy lift. Are they all of or equal impact, or are there a few strategies that would get us nice?
I mean, to be honest with you, everyone on there, we do have some we do, on a regular basis, some are an annual thing, but those are all strategies that we implement currently.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, 44.
Yeah, so the question of, should there be a statement of evaluating technologies and methods to handle plastic currently going into the landfills?
Yes, I just asked.
Okay.
Oh, plastics.
You got that answer.
Yeah, I did.
And is affordability really the key? Keep user fees low and affordable.
Yeah, what was, so the question was, on the affordable, comment was what? Is affordable really the key?
You wanna just drop
I mean,
affordable?
we,
Fees low?
we're a service,
But for me, it felt like the other thing, keep them affordable. Low isn't necessarily the key word, it's gonna change over time. So it's affordability in the context of.
So drop the low, got it, okay, HD 9.
Wait, I want to go there and board with it, so I guess it's fine. I don't want to move too fast and then we don't have our departments on board that actually are going to be implementing this. 9.
Last one.
So public safety, last but not least. Provide a high level of emergency medical care, fire protection, police protection, emergency management, and all hazards response to all residents and visitors to the county. And the comment says none of the implementation strategies acknowledge the need for continual staff training in areas such as mental health, sensitivity, and socioeconomic bias.
And she does so well, she comes right to the front of the room, and I know she has a great policy voice.
Yes, we can all directions. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tricia Wolford. I'm Marion Arundel County Fire Chief.
So the comment, I need interpretation, is the training, for my members, or is it my members educating the community on what we do in that role? Whoever put the comment on.
She's online. So, go ahead and go to another one and I'll ask.
Okay, so the next one is ensure appropriate levels of staffing and resources arrive with an acceptable response time to all calls for service, and then it's consolidate services where feasible in order to increase efficiency and address budget limitations. And the comment is, what does this mean? Delivery, citing, location, question.
And so, again, just for clarification, so I'm not wasting anybody's time, the what does this mean, is that the consolidation part or the response time? So the consolidation refers to SEEK. If you, mine is a flip your page, and we're slightly off of different documents. Consolidate Fire and Police 911 Dispatch Center and our headquarters building. So that would be that reference to consolidate those, which would also be then consolidating our call taker. So we wouldn't have redundancy in a fire headquarters and a police headquarters, ultimately saving the taxpayer dollar.
Consolidate sites. And then are there other ways to increase efficiency and address budget limitations besides consolidating services? And if so, the recommendation is to drop the consolidation part and just make the second part of the policy. So it seeks all feasible means of increasing efficiency while addressing budget limitations.
The point I was trying to make there was whether there are other things besides consolidation, and by putting consolidation as part of the strategy, you limited yourself from doing other things.
There would be other things. Those things currently haven't been identified, so I would say consolidation would be an element of.
So it is a strategy of the bigger policy.
Yes,
right?
that would be an excellent way to put it.
So the bigger policy is increase efficiency and address budget limitations, right?
Correct, because internally there'll be ways we can create our own efficiencies.
Right.
Yes.
So I was just thinking that if you took the consolidation out of the policy.
To not pigeonhole the comment.
Correct.
I would agree, because it still reads with the same approach.
Exactly.
So seek all feasible means of increasing efficiency while addressing
I have a question. Okay, wouldn't you be concerned if consolidation would decrease efficiency? If you're consolidating call centers or dispatchers? In time to get to an accident is critical. Why consolidate something that could cause complications?
Well, I wasn't making the judgment. I would leave it to them to determine whether if you had a single call center servicing multiple needs, it was more effective than having duplicative call centers, for instance.
So depending on the research of which agency, there is research that proves that to consolidate certain portions would increase the efficiency, but it would only be separate elements. So on the fire side, it would show that the research is if you have a call taker trained in police, fire, EMS, they're the ones just receiving the call. The dispatcher, on the other hand, having a solely trained fire dispatcher versus police dispatcher are better left as sole entities. So there's components of it that would relate.
The next comment, based on rated capacity and average state population, it doesn't seem like expansions are necessary. So that's related to the detention center, and we do not have an answer for you. We'll have to get back to you on that. I mean, that is my sense because of the capacity that's available at both detention centers, but I don't know with population increasing, I can't answer that emphatically, that there's enough capacity of those.
We need police departments.
Corrections.
Corrections.
That's another transition. And then fine with inserting the word.
And if we could go back to role HC9, went off. It is for staff members was the question.
Oh, so how are our staff members trained in, I'm sorry, where is it at? I lost it.
It was from Karen.
Keep going up.
That one.
Yep.
Thank you.
How are our staff members trained in mental health sensitivity and socioeconomic bias? So right now, we have a very robust peer support team. We're actually one of the best peer support teams in the region. These are my own members that are trained in supporting other members of the fire service and the community in the event that there is terrible accidents that affect their mental health. So that training, the baseline training, all members receive. And then the elevation of that training is members that have identified themselves as wanting to go above and beyond that make up that team. And then those members, we make sure that we have enough on duty for all of our shifts and throughout all of our battalions. And then they're called upon, unfortunately, quite often. We send teams to other jurisdictions, say they have a member suicide, they have a tragic death in the family, anything like that. So all of our members are trained to a base level. The socioeconomic bias, we do not have any training in that. If anybody has that information, I would be interested in including that in our recruit training academy. That's where they get the base level of all training. You know, we operate on the mentality of if you're in trouble, we're there to help, and that's all we need to know is you need something and we can probably provide it. So we just do that.
And so she's also wondering, because it doesn't acknowledge that need, do you feel that it should be put into a strategy?
If I were to be that specific, that would be a pretty robust strategy, because I would also want to be specific in the other things that we train in.
Okay, so just leave it, you already are doing it.
Yeah,
And I'll see if she has somebody that can help you with training, information, material.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Regarding modernization, particularly with your 911 systems, is it technically available somewhere in the country to geolocate a cell phone for an emergency response?
We do that right now.
And you have that capacity?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Along with the
It's actually a law enforcement ability. If I get a minute of your time when you're off the hot seat.
Am I out?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having us.
You're off the hot seat, but you can't leave yet. No. Okay, a couple things. Thank you. I think we're almost there. So, the community college has been invited to come back on the 5th, along with Rec and Park and Office of Emergency Management. Some of you are not doing your homework. Some of you, for the first time, saw this document. Some of you have not accessed your drive. I can't stress to you enough to look at these documents before you come to the meetings. If you need help, we are here to help you. I know some of you do and have reached out and have had documents downloaded directly to you. We cannot continue down this road unless you're educated on the information. Please open your drive.
I promise
Please.
to work harder.
Please make your comments so that the staff can have them ready for meetings like this. You've got to make your comment ahead of time. You've got to do this either on, they give everything to us by Friday. You have Saturday, Sunday, Monday to make your comment. If you want it early, you have this now. So do it before February 5th. Make your comment, please, and anything else that they do. Staff is working very hard. We need to.
Comments on what we went over tonight, you're not gonna make comments on that, because we need to move on, because we have transportation and mobility, which we know will take, quite a bit of time. at the February 5th meeting as well as economic development, and then going over recreation parks.
And all that. So, let's make sure that our comments have to do with changes and are not opinions. So we need to be very specific in what we are doing. And please make them on the drive so that we can see what you're doing.
If you're having trouble with all of the beginning context, maybe read the goals, policies, strategies first, and then go back if you're not understanding it.
Don't forget, we have sidebars here. If there's something that you want to have included, make sure you write on the pad. Make sure you come prepared. If there's things that you want to send to me, I have several different folders of suggestions. I'm more than happy to make those and compile that on. Okay, any other things? Do I have a motion to adjourn? Oh, sorry. Because I know you all have read them. I know you know that the last meeting was in December. Do I have a motion to approve the December 18th minutes? Kate is moving and John is seconding. Okay, and we already have a motion again to adjourn. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You can put anybody's name, just make it arbitrary. I think everybody will agree. And then you can see when I'm reading these minutes, who has the motion.